Well, joining us now from Tel Aviv is retired Colonel Richard Kemp. He was the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and he's a strategic consultant on terrorism, intelligence, and security. So let's get right to it. You were the commander of the British forces in Afghanistan, and the International Criminal Court tried to bring charges of war crimes against Britain. What do you think of the current situation? What are they actually trying to do?
Well, the International Criminal Court has had Israel in its sights for many years now and have attempted to launch investigations and prosecutions against Israel, so far unsuccessfully. The reality is, of course, that this is the culmination, in many ways, the culmination of a long-standing propaganda campaign against Israel that's reinforced by the ICC, by the United Nations. Given that the majorities certainly in the UN, which are aligned against Israel. So this is a political move rather than anything even remotely affecting a judicial move.
Should we look at it as an ideological move as well? The former chief prosecutor, Bensouda, she was a professing Muslim. The current one, Karim Khan, his father's Pakistani. Is there ideology driving this as well?
I don't know about the individual ideology of the people concerned, but as institutions, the ICC and also the United Nations Human Rights Council is ideologically opposed to Israel. It is certainly an ideological war. And the problem with it is that it's very dangerous because these condemnations, even if it doesn't get as far as a formal investigation or a prosecution, it's ammunition that's used by anti-Israel activists to stir up hate. It causes greater anti-Semitic attacks throughout the world. It gives Hamas justification for what they're doing. And it's part of a cycle of violence that starts with Hamas carrying out war crimes, the UN and the ICC ignoring those war crimes, and blaming Israel, falsely blaming Israel for war crimes, which then in turn causes Hamas to act again because it's playing right into the game that they're trying to play, which is to isolate and vilify and delegitimize Israel.
You've argued that the ICC actually stands against peace, that by doing these very public charges that war crimes are being committed, that it hinders the peace process. Walk us through that.
It does, as I said, it gives ammunition to those people who want to undermine Israel's legitimacy. It prevents people from seeing the real picture of Israel, and I think one of the most perverse aspects of the way the ICC operates is that the ICC is designed to prosecute war crimes in cases where the countries themselves, the countries who allegedly carry out the war crimes, are either unwilling or unable to do so. Now, Israel has a very, very well-respected, a very strong policy and tradition in its history of dealing with allegations of war crimes or any other crimes. And it's like Britain, it's like the US. We have working, long-standing, historically respected legal systems, yet it's Britain, Israel, and the US that the International Criminal Court has frequently turned on to try and bring prosecutions for war crimes. And the reason for it is it goes back to the ideological political incentive, which is to try and make out that those countries, that some of the most effective democratic countries with strong legal traditions are just as bad as those countries who don't have anything and don't have any intention of prosecuting or bringing war crimes charges. It's partly as a result of complaints by some African countries that the focus of the ICC was overwhelmingly on them, and rightly too, because the countries concerned were countries that did not have proper legal systems or the will to bring charges.
Let's talk about the current administration and I guess American foreign policy just over the past decade. John Kerry famously saying there can be no peace in the Middle East without a resolution to the Palestinian problem. Then you have the Abraham Accords under President Trump. During that time, Trump said that the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court wasn't welcome in the U.S. and literally imposed sanctions on the ICC. And then under the Biden administration, all of that was lifted. What could Americans do? What should American foreign policy be in response to what the ICC is currently doing?
Well, I believe the U.S. government should sanction members of the International Criminal Court if they carry out this kind of vexatious prosecution, which is very clearly intended for political purposes. And the same should apply in the United Kingdom. The U.S. is not a party to the ICC. The UK is. The UK should. I've urged the UK in the past to leave the ICC, to distance itself from the ICC and isolate the ICC, not because it does no good work. It has done good work in the past, but as I discussed just now, it's really ideologically opposed to Western democracies. In a way, it's a form of virtue signaling to the people who actually, quite rightly, are the finger is often pointed by the ICC, and justly too. So I think the US should sanction the ICC, but I think an even bigger cause for concern than the ICC, which so far has got nowhere in its attempted prosecutions, is the United Nations Human Rights Council. And the US is a member of the UN Human Rights Council, and the UN Human Rights Council has got an obsession with Israel. It's carried out more resolutions against Israel, accusing Israel of war crimes, I think, than every other country put together. It's an international disgrace. And what the US should do there, I think, is to defund the UN Human Rights Council. It needs to be, in some way, it needs to be reformed. The reforms of the Human Rights Council have been attempted in the past, and they haven't succeeded. Successive UN Secretary Generals have acknowledged that the UN Human Rights Council is obsessed with and strongly biased against Israel, yet nothing happens. I think the time has come. And you can guarantee that once this war is ended, even probably before it's ended, we will be seeing allegations by the Human Rights Council of war crimes, unjust allegations of war crimes against Israel. So the time has come now, I think, to make a stand against the Human Rights Council.
Well, let's talk about the UN and the Security Council calling for a pause, a humanitarian pause. And I'm just amazed both the U.S. and Britain abstained, and so the resolution went forward. So tell us, from a military standpoint, what would a pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas, what would be the downside of that?
Well, I think it's a complex issue, and you covered it in an article. One of your items just now is the issue of hostages, and of course there is reasonable argument to be made that if all the hostages are released, or a significant number of hostages are released by Hamas, then that could be justification enough to have a short period of ceasefire, maybe for a few days, while the hostages are released. If that doesn't occur, if there is not a substantial exchange of hostages, or rather releasing of hostages, then I think there's no argument, in my view, for any form of ceasefire, because what it does, it basically is denying Israel the right to defend itself. It's denying Israel the ability to protect its citizens, because what it says is Hamas carry on, Hamas regroup, reorganize, prepare to carry out more attacks. Israel, stop defending, get back behind your borders. We're back to not quite the 7th of October, but we're into a very difficult situation again. Whereas right now, Hamas is under enormous pressure. It's been subjected to an extremely intensive military campaign by the IDF in the air and from the ground. And that needs to press ahead. It needs to go ahead to the destruction of Hamas if a ceasefire occurs, we're not going to see Hamas suddenly deciding that they want to live in peace with Israel. That's very clearly out of the window. So it's just a disadvantage for Israel, unless, as I say, hostages are released in accompaniment with a ceasefire. But I think the only real ceasefire should occur either when Hamas is destroyed or if Hamas surrender, lay down their weapons, surrender, release all the hostages. That's what the UN Security Council should be calling on Hamas to be doing. That's the purpose of the United Nations. It's not the purpose of the United Nations is not to deny a democratically elected government that is a sovereign member of the United Nations to cease defending its citizens.
Colonel Kemp, thank you so much for your insight, and keep standing with Israel. It's greatly appreciated.